Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernest Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The transfer portal, we're almost in July, and it is still producing players going to other programs. And this player in particular, we've been waiting to announce his transfer portal edition for a while. Grant Nelson finally committed to the Alabama Crimson Tide. I was ready to make a video on this a couple weeks ago when he was expected to commit to Alabama, but he finally did make the jump to the Crimson Tide by announcing today he's going to play for Alabama next season. I think this is a big addition for Alabama in a variety of ways. We're going to get into it here and more, but Alabama definitely now has bolstered their roster for next season with the addition of Grant Nelson. Now, Grant Nelson, he was a player last season for the North Dakota St Bison. He averaged 18 points per game, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists, and he's 6'11", 225 pounds, so he has really good size, and he is a player that is capable of stepping out shooting the 3 ball at a decent rate. He only shot 26%, but for a guy that is 6'11", that's not too bad, and he also shot 52% from the field, so he does shoot a really good percentage from the field, and he shot 72% at the free throw line, so he's not a liability there as well, and he definitely helped out North Dakota State last year. He's by far their best player, but now he's trying to make the jump to the Power 6 level. That's a big deal for any player, but particularly a center, because it is tougher for a center to translate his success from a smaller school to a bigger school than it is a guard. But I do think that Grant Nelson shows you a lot of tools, like his ability to go off the dribble and drive into the lane and kind of back down players on his own without a lot of help from other players having to pass the ball to him. He can step out and shoot the 3 every now and then, and I think that those skills will translate to the Power 6 level, but he's definitely going to have to show that he can do it against better competition before we can say that he will have a lot of success in the SEC. But I do think that he is a guy that can still average double figures for sure and still be able to make Alabama's front court pretty formidable for next season. But why is this a big addition for Alabama besides the fact that they really did need a front court player? Arkansas was another program that was looking at Grant Nelson. You never want to lose a guy to another conference opponent, and particularly a team like Arkansas that is probably ahead of Alabama in most people's minds for next season in college basketball. The Razorbacks are looking really good for next year, and if Eric Musselman had been able to land Grant Nelson in addition to all the other transfers that they've already gotten, that would have been insane, and they would have been the clear favorite #1 team in the SEC for next season, probably with Kentucky as a close second now that the Wildcats have landed as many additions as they have gotten. But Alabama, they were a team that was looking really good for next season, but unfortunately one of the transfers that they were going to get from Wichita State, Jaquan Walton, he was not able to go to Alabama because he had some stuff going on, and Nate Oats was not able to allow him to play for the Alabama Crimson Tide. He ended up transferring to UCF. They just had bad news with Javon Quinterly announcing he's transferring. That's a tough loss for Alabama because Javon Quinterly is a very experienced guard. He's not one of the best players in the country, but he would have been a solid player for Alabama again next season, and definitely a player that's very familiar with the Crimson Tide fan base because he's been on the roster for a few seasons, and he would have definitely helped out the backcourt next year. Jaden Bradley transferred as well to Arizona, and you also had Namari Burnett transfer to Michigan. So Alabama's lost a lot of players in their backcourt. And then you look at the draft, Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney, and Charles Bediako, their entire front court, besides Nick Pringle, who is returning to Alabama, they're all gone to the NBA. So Alabama's lost a lot of players from last year's team, which in this transfer portal era is not the worst thing in the world because you could just bring more players in, and that's what Nate Oats is doing. But are these players as talented as the players that they have lost? I don't know. I think Alabama is still going to be really solid next year. I think they'll be an upper half SEC team. More than likely a surefire NCAA tournament team, but there are some question marks for sure on Alabama's roster because a lot of these players are going to be freshmen next year because Alabama has 4 4-star freshmen in Sam Walters, Mohamed Diabate, and Chris Parker, who are already committed to Alabama, but they did just recently get Jaron Stevenson, a 6'10" power forward that reclassified from the 2024 class. He's from North Carolina, so a lot of people thought he was going to North Carolina, but he did go to Alabama. That was big for Nate Oats in the Crimson Tide. I think that shows you the recruiting chops that Nate Oats has. He's able to bring in players like this. He's doing a great job continuing to get talent into Tuscaloosa. but also looking at Jaron Stevenson, he probably saw an available front court spot for him to be able to play immediately. Maybe not in the starting lineup, but definitely playing off the bench. But he could start, you never know. But he is a guy that is going to be interesting to see how he's going to be able to adjust to college basketball a year early because he's reclassifying. That's always an interesting thing to monitor. But I do think Jaron Stevenson is a really talented player. He was a 5-star recruit in the 2024 class, moved him down to a 4-star in the 2023 class, and I think he can play next to Grant Nelson. And again, this is big for Alabama because when Grant Nelson was expected to commit, there was a lot of cloudness around that. Was he actually committing? There was a lot of speculation there. There was a lot of tweets that were going around. Was Grant Nelson going to Bama? But at the end of the day, he did decide to commit 2 weeks later to the Alabama Crimson Tide. He did not go to Arkansas. He did not go to Baylor or Iowa, two other programs that were looking at him as well. I could have seen Grant Nelson going to a team like Baylor, but he chose to go to the SEC and the Crimson Tide, and I do feel like Alabama's front court is not going to be as talented as last year with Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney, and Charles Bediako, but having Jaron Stevenson and getting Grant Nelson, a guy from North Dakota State that can go off the dribble, he can shoot threes at a decent rate for a 6'11 center. There's a lot of tools to his game. He's a solid passer as well for his size. I think that he's going to help out Alabama's front court tremendously. And looking at the rest of Alabama's roster, they got Mark Sears back. That's big. They also got Rylan Griffin back, and Aaron Estrada and Latrell Wright-Seller, two other transfers that Alabama's brought in. They're both guards, and Aaron Estrada was one of the best guards in the country last year. He averaged over 20 points per game at Hofstra. So Alabama's not devoid of talent. The talent is there. Nate Oats has brought the talent in like he always does, and Grant Nelson might be the icing on the cake to this roster because they needed a center, and Grant Nelson is the guy that will be playing at center for Alabama next year, starting at the 5, and I do think Grant Nelson can be a double-digit scorer in the SEC next season. And if Grant Nelson's skills that he showcased at North Dakota State can translate to the Power 6 level and Alabama, then I think the Crimson Tide have a shot to be really solid in the SEC next season, and maybe just another transfer portal guard to replace Javon Quinterly's transfer can maybe put Alabama over the top to be a surefire top 3 team in the SEC next season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about Grant Nelson finally announcing that he's transferring to the Alabama Crimson Tide, and whether you think that Grant Nelson will be able to help out Alabama be a good team in the SEC next season, and how good of a job you think Nate Oats is doing with the Crimson Tide in this offseason with recruiting. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.